Welcome to another episode of Courageous Conversations. I am Arouna Gracy, and today I'm in conversation with Johannah Hull. She works in the corporate world and is also an amateur long distance runner. Today, she's here to talk about her grief journey and the loss that she has experienced in her personal life.
Hi, Arouna.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure.
Could you talk a little bit about the grief incident that you experienced in your life?
Okay, that's starting out with a very difficult conversation, but yeah. So it happened in 2016, December, so it's been, 5 years, 8 months, and 2 days. That's when I lost my 19-month-old son, Jared, and thus began my grief journey, and it's just been an uphill climb since then. So to talk about it has always been very difficult because it just makes me weak in my knees, what they say. When you hear of grief and, when you hear of, oh, somebody lost somebody, you always like, oh, that is so sad. But when you have to live that life, it just becomes really difficult. I mean, words can't explain the feeling that, you have to go through. So, yeah, that's how it has been. So, especially when it comes to your own child. So, when you lose a parent or a grandparent, you always say, you're losing a connection with your past, right? Because you've lived with them. But when it is your child, you dream of a future with them. So, you actually lose your entire future. So, I don't even know how to explain that part of grief, So that is something that I'm still struggling with. So waking up each day and like, this is not how I envisioned my life. This is not what I had in mind. So, yeah, that's how grief has been for me. It's an everyday journey for me. So,
I'm sure even for you to sit with me and talk about it is a huge step and a tremendous step. So I appreciate you sitting down and talking about this. I would like to ask about what are the immediate emotions and feelings that you felt when the incident happened in the following days, in the weeks that followed?
So the first thing was shock. I was like, okay, this is my son. I mean, what happened? How can this happen to us? Why us? So it took a while for me to actually process what was happening. Like, I was in shock. I was like calling everybody, trying to get in touch with my husband, trying to call my dad, like do something, trying to speak to, arguing with the doctors at the emergency room and calling my pediatrician. Like, these people don't know what they're doing. I was practically like, someone who had lost her senses, just trying to save my little boy. That's what I was trying to do at that point. When I found my son on the floor, it's not like he was sick, or it wasn't like he was terminally ill, right? He was a happy-go-lucky boy who was just running around playing. And minutes before we lost him, he just came speaking to me. He just kept saying, "Mama, Mama." And the next thing I see, he's gone. So it was shock. And then came anger. I was angry with everything that was happening around. I didn't know how to process it. And till date, I don't think I've accepted it. I'm still in the stage where I still miss him. I still think that, it's probably just a bad dream and life can still go back to normal. And it's been over 5 years. And I'm still there, so I still feel like I'm a little stuck in 2016. I'm not able to move forward. My daughter was 5.5 then. Today she's 11, and some ways I just feel that I'm not fully present in her growth. Though I am doing my best. It's like you wake up one day and then you're grieving the loss of your son, and you also have to try and move along, for the sake of your living child. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're torn between heaven and earth every single day, every single waking moment. So that is very challenging. So it is very, very stressful sometimes. Yeah. It takes a toll on you mentally and emotionally every single day.
Yeah.
So yeah, shock, anger. I mean, name it, name all the wrong emotions, that's what you can associate. That's what I felt. I felt very lost for a long time. I was at one point like, a social butterfly. I loved talking to people, mingling with people. And I found myself becoming a total recluse. I did not want to associate with people because people asked me difficult questions and I wasn't prepared to answer. I took my time to actually start responding to people and talking about Jared's loss. Like even today, if somebody asks me, what happened to your son? I still do not have the strength to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of courage for me to even, it's like reliving that moment, right? So it takes a lot of strength and courage for me to actually talk about that.
I'm sure
Yeah.
it does. You spoke about people's questions that came to you right after it happened. What specific responses do you remember, even as you were experiencing the grief, the shock, the anger, and the frustration? What were some of the responses that you got from your immediate family or your extended family?
For your immediate family also, they try to avoid talking about him because they think that I am in pain and that they are hurting me by talking about him. But in reality, I love talking about my son. But that's not how it is, right? So sometimes you want to change that narrative a bit, at least with your near and dear ones, treat us like we are normal people and talk about the ones we've lost because there's no harm in talking about him. Yeah, we might shed a tear or two, but it's okay. Those are, our fond memories of the beloved ones that we've lost. I'd rather do that than, you pretend like my son never existed. I think that's something that I would really want to tell the world that, when somebody is grieving, this is probably something that, you can do and this might help somebody.
Yeah. In the beginning, you mentioned that even it's been 5.5 years and it's still very difficult to talk about it. But I'm sure immediately after it happened, you were at a stage when you couldn't talk about it at all.
Yes.
How do you say you have gotten to this point where even though it hurts, even though it's painful, you are able to sit down with another person and talk about it? And
So I think within a week or so, within a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, or I think it's less than a month, I started my grief counseling, right? So a week after I lost my son, I actually traveled to another city to go and get a tattoo of him. Like I wear him with pride in my arm. And even then, I found it more comforting to talk to the tattoo artist, because he's a total stranger, somebody who was not judging me. So I could talk. And in counseling, they're not judging you, they're helping you understand how to process your grief. So, yeah, I think that's something that I started very early on.
how did you hear about grief counseling? Did a friend suggest it or were you aware of it on your own? What prompted you and gave you the strength and the courage to seek grief counseling?
When I lost Jared, it was not something that I actually even thought of immediately. So I remember, Santosh reaching out to me on Facebook because it turns out to be the same day, that like it was his birthday, the day we lost Jared. So that's the most common thing there. And he wrote to me saying, at any time if you want to talk. I took some time, like I said, 2 to 3 weeks for me to actually be ready for it. And I think that's when I decided to go and see him and talk to him. I still remember the first few sessions. It was so difficult. I was just crying. I couldn't talk much. He was just so patient with me, I mean, that's all he did. He just gave me time. There were awkward silences at times, but that helped. I do remember there was one session that lasted for like 3 hours. Like, who does that? That was like my safe space. So that's how I started. So earlier it used to be like a minimum of 2 hours and 3 hours. And then gradually over time, we decided, all right, a certain limited amount of time was also effective for me. What actually helped me with the counseling was how to be prepared or how to respond to some of the most difficult questions. The one thing that he told me is like, okay, so from now on, people will ask these kinds of questions. And, since you're a young mother, and when you are a young mother, people usually expect, oh, is this your only child? Right? How do you answer that? So the first time somebody asked me that, I was really caught off guard. But then, yes, this was something that I was sort of preparing. It's not like, it's a play and you're preparing for it, but it's just that you're trying to wear, it's like a bulletproof jacket. I know you will get hurt, but at least it's not going to hurt you really that bad. So some of the responses, like, what could I say? But it hurts when I talk about this. Why are people so insensitive? So these were some of the questions that I faced the initial few months, because we didn't want to be associated with known people. We wanted to be with the unknown folks. And turns out, years later, like even 5.5 years later, somebody asked me this question just 3 weeks ago. And it was my neighbor's daughter-in-law, who had come from somewhere. And then she's like, hi, Ma, how are you doing? And then, how is your little one? Oh, she's grown up. Only one daughter, is it? And I'm like, I just don't know what to say. I'm like, no. I feel like, okay, I'm still choking, while responding to that. So these are some of the things that, counseling has helped me talk about. It's, why do I have to deny the existence of my son? I know he's not here with me today, but he was, I gave birth to him. I spent 19 months with him. We were a happy family at that point. So I think learning to accept that and learning to talk about it, I think all of these things I just gained I definitely got that strength from my counseling sessions, and that's something that helped me to get to where I am today.
Yeah. And your daughter, how old is she now?
She is now 11.
Okay, and you said she was 5.5 when you lost Jared. So what would you say is the difference that she noticed in you while you were going through this grief journey, when it happened, and then in the years that came after that, as you started going through grief counseling and you started learning steps to cope with the situations? What would you say, what is the difference that you think she noticed in you because of this healing journey that you got on?
I still remember this one particular instance. So when Natalie used to cry about something, I'm like, don't be such a crybaby, love. And she turned around and said, Mama, you're the crybaby. You're the one who's always crying. And that stuck with me, So she has seen her mom, who was a very happy person at one time, who's always crying. Because for me, it was like I had to cry, when I'm probably cooking, I was crying. When I was probably getting her ready for school, I would be crying. So crying was something that was very common. Like, people would just see me cry all the time. And when my daughter noticed that, and that for me was like a big jolt. Like, okay, is this what my daughter perceives me to be? Right. So yes, that's something that Natalie did observe. So sometimes she would be like, she becomes my mom, quite literally, and like, it's okay, Mama. And she'll come and give me like the best hugs, and she will say, it's okay, I'm here. I'm sure Jared is happy in heaven. And, but she dealt with grief, in a very difficult way as well. The first few months and all, she used to have nightmares there was this one time, I remember, she's like, an octopus swallowed Jared. So she was processing his loss in a very different way, and we started her also on she also started counseling.
Yeah.
So again, it was Santosh, so he would talk to him. So she always knew, she understood that, okay, talking to Santosh meant, okay, we are going to talk a little bit about Jared, a little bit. But it's not exactly about him. So I always knew how she was processing it, in some ways or the other. But yeah, so she has seen her mom change.
Yeah. You also mentioned that your immediate family and your friends, it did not help you that they avoided talking to you about it. It did not help that they were avoidant of the topic. in the pretense or in the attempt to not make you sadder.
Right.
But that actually cost you more grief,
pain, yes.
more pain. And it's better to always hold space. And that's what I hear you saying. You started holding space for yourself. You also started holding space for your daughter to process the emotions and the feelings, no matter how difficult and hard it gets.
Yes.
Would you say that that was helpful in how far you have come? I'm sure there's still a long way to go in this journey, but you know how far you have come since it happened.
Yeah, so what I also started doing was, I started writing first. Within the first few days itself, I used to feel like, okay, I'm going to write to my son, like Dear Diary types, that concept came in where I started to write. And then eventually what I did was, I would start something called the Grief Journal series of my own, little lessons that I'm learning in life. So I started documenting, and I've also had people reach out to me from different parts of the world on social media. Like there was this old colleague of mine. She wrote to me saying, Johannah, these series have actually helped me, because I lost a brother when I was little, and I always saw my mom crying. Today I understand what my mom was going through.
Yeah.
So I think that space that you've created, maybe to start talking at some point, is helpful. But I've also had people say, hey, imagine if your daughter grows up and she's just reading through your Facebook posts. What do you think she's going to think of you? So my learning, what I documented was not just the sad part. I also documented my learnings as my success story. Like you told that, I am an amateur long distance runner. I started running also as a way of coping with grief. One of the things that I felt is, just put your body through torture. That pain, it will probably supersede the pain that you're feeling within. And when people ask me, hey, you got a tattoo, how long did it take? I said, about 7 to 8 hours. They're like, didn't it hurt? I said, but the pain that I'm going through hurts far more. So sometimes, you're trying to digress, you're trying to do different things. And that's how, little things started. So, I don't know. So that's another coping mechanism. I don't know if it's the right way or not, but sometimes I feel I'm just trying to escape some pain.
Yeah. I don't think there's a right and a wrong way. Like you said, your daughter was processing grief in a different way. You're processing grief in a different way. You're honoring your son's memory. And at the same time, you are still alive. You're living your life out for the sake of your daughter, for yourself.
Right.
I was going to ask about the specific steps that you took to get on this grief journey. You mentioned journaling. You mentioned the series that you started on social media and the running. Are there other steps that you took? Some steps that you might have taken, but you failed to keep up with it and then went back to it, or?
My counseling was like the biggest step that I ever took. So, the funny part is like I had Natalie's classmate mom come and also tell me one day, Johannah, I know it's a very difficult thing, but if you don't mind, you should talk to my cousin who is a counselor. I'm like, who is this person? And she told them, like, Santosh. I said, I am actually going to Santosh.
Okay.
So it's like sometimes you hear the same thing from different sources and you feel validated, right?
Yes.
Okay, I am on the right path. So like I said, I started my fitness journey as well, because somewhere you feel like, you know what, now my daughter's already dealt with certain amount of grief. Let's try and be a little more supportive and take care of my health, because the initial few days my appetite was really bad, right? And the one thing that we also took to, which was not really a good thing, was a lot of alcohol, right? So we had these new friends, and they think the best way to distract us was to have lots of alcohol. So my husband started drinking a lot more, and I would literally rely on alcohol to like pass out, because I had trouble sleeping. I still do, but I do not take alcohol the way I did the initial few months, because that was something that I felt was very unhealthy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the undocumented step
Yeah.
that I say that I took at that point, because I realized that even though, I looked, everything was fine, or I wasn't eating healthy because I didn't want to eat. We started drinking a little too much, and we decided to, it was like self-awareness. So then we decided, okay, let's not do this. This is not going to help us in any form. So one of the incidents was we had gone to watch a movie, and when the movie starts, you see the part which says, drinking alcohol is injurious to health, and my daughter stands up in the middle of the theater and like, Mama, look, something will happen to you if you do this. And so the fear
She
is
was
there in her. So she's like, I've already lost Jared.
Yeah.
I can't afford to have anything happen to you. So that was an eye opener for us.
Yeah.
So these are little things that, we thought, okay, let's just change the way we are processing this. So again, like you said, there is no right or wrong way, but there were a lot of trial and errors, that we embarked, on that journey. So this was something that we said, no, this can't be it.
Yeah.
So
What's important is the effort that you make. And you said, even today you wake up in the morning and you choose to keep living. You choose to keep, taking responsibility for your life, for your daughter's life.
yeah, and another thing that, especially when it comes to the loss of your own child, is dealing with guilt and blame. So our lives changed completely, and especially for my daughter, it's still not an easy one for her. So the first step that, the first thing that started out in my counseling, which is still like an everyday effort, is that try to not blame yourself and not feel guilty, because no matter what, it happened on my watch. So that guilt literally kills me every day. So there are moments when I just doze off and I'm like, I just wake up with that fright, I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? So, yeah. So that is also something that I think is still an everyday journey.
Yeah, I believe you're very brave. What would you say a person who has experienced the loss? What should that person do? Some of the steps that they can take.
It's easy to say this, but not very easy to do.
Yeah.
Like, toughen up, like literally develop like a thick skin to what people say.
Would you also say leaning into grief counseling and taking the help of all the resources that are around you?
Yes, absolutely. So I've had people, Santosh gave me a book to read as well. I read the book, not once, not twice. I've read it multiple times. There are times I would just go back, because I can't call Santosh in the middle of the night when I'm crying, right? So you just go back to the books or, the resources that are available to you. Look at pictures. There are different things that you do. You can honor your loved ones. And counseling sessions have really, really helped me. Like I said, that used to be my safe space. It helped me talk about it. It helped me process it. It also helped me and my daughter, right, to a great extent, where, like I said, she was also in grief counseling, but she didn't know it was called counseling. She's like, I'm just going to talk to Santosh. So it's very simple. I said, he'll just ask you some questions, or you can tell him certain things. And, even for a child, I think it is very important that you do not neglect their emotions. And Natalie was, 5.5. So even before she was 6, we started her counseling. And there was something that really did help. Therapy in any form is absolutely necessary. Yeah, we tried retail therapy. Trust me, that does not help at all. It's just the dopamine hit you hit, and then you're like, okay, what's next? But these counseling sessions, I know, were very difficult for me because I'm always crying, but at least you get insights into how you can process it, and you're like, you get the assurance that what you're doing is not wrong, and that it is okay to feel the way you feel.
So you have found and you are still finding your own way to do you.
Yes.
Yes.
So like I said, counseling, running, writing, talking to people. I work from home. I still don't have the strength to I tried going back to a full-time job. So yeah, one of the things that I also wanted to mention was when after I lost Jared, I couldn't go back to a full-time corporate job. It took me a lot of time, and um, it took me at least a year to get into like a part-time kind of a role. So that was my condition to people. Um, I will join you provided you give me like just 4 to 6 hours of time that I should work, because I have to be home in time for my daughter when she comes back from school. That's how it started.
Yeah.
So slowly I started going out of the house for like 4 hours, then 6 hours. And then eventually I took up a full-time role, like a proper, like a 10 to 5 kind of a role. And then I just realized that, children are very resilient. So she started growing, but I think I was holding on to her, in some ways or the other. So, but at the end of the day, work is important. So it took a while for me to get back to the kind of person that I was, to where I am today. And I work in the comfort of my home sometimes because it's just easy to not expose yourself to a lot of people, because when they know you have a child, again, questions like, is this your only child? What's happening to your family? All of these conversations. So these are things that you do to avoid. So it took a while. Still, like you said, it's one step at a time, one day at a time.
Well, Johannah, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about your journey. It's not easy, but you are slowly progressing. Thank you so much for your time and your bravery and your courage. Wish you all the best to your family, to your daughter, as you keep moving forward. And I hope your story helps others out there who are experiencing something like this. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here, Arouna. Thank you.